Mental health is a must for you and your children. Wow. I mean, let's just be honest. Right now, it just feels like there's more stress on us. I know we have technology and it's great, but in the same time, it feels like the technology is just making us move faster and things are more escalated. You know, I'll never forget when I first resigned from my corporate position working at Hewlett Packard, I had an opportunity to be on a TV show called Teen Summit. And it was a live program, BET's Teen Summit. It was going to be a Saturday morning, and I was living out in the Bay Area at the time. And so I flew from San Francisco to Washington, D.C. on a Friday morning. And I arrived in Washington, D.C. early afternoon, and I remember I got a rental car. Now, I'm from Silver Spring, Maryland. And so I was driving out to go see my mom, and I remember saying to myself, you know, in this rental car, let me drive by and see my grandparents. My grandparents, Ingraham Street, Northwest Washington, D.C. What? Okay. And so I'll never forget, I made the turn to get on to Ingraham Street. And as I'm driving, I see my grandparents on the porch. And what was so amazing was like, they were just sitting there. And so I waved, but they didn't see me because they didn't recognize the rental car. And so I drove, I was trying to find a parking space, and I had to make a U-turn. And so I found a parking space. And I'll never forget, I found this parking space and I parked my car and I could still see my grandparents on the porch. And what was so amazing to me at that moment, right? I'm in my late 20s at this time, and I'm looking at my grandparents. There's no television, there's no cell phone, there's no radio. It was just my grandma and my grandpa sitting on the porch. And I said, wow. And as I watched them, I said to myself, man, this is beautiful. This is beautiful. And I remember it might have only been a few minutes, but it felt like an hour, just me watching. And I said, wow. And I said to myself, I hope one day I have that. You know, don't need distractions. I can just be totally present. I remember I just got a little welled up because it was so beautiful. It's so beautiful just seeing my grandma and my grandpa have been married, you know, so many years, you know, and I was just like, wow. And so I got out of my car and started walking up the sidewalk, you know, towards them. And I remember, you know, my grandma said, oh, hey, Marlon, how you doing? What a pleasant surprise. I said, hey, grandma. And my grandpa said, hey, boy. That's what he called me, right? And I said, hey, grandpa, how you doing? He said, I'm doing good. And, you know, I don't know about your grandparents, but my grandma was like, oh, I know you're hungry. All right, come on. We got some food for you. So, oh, thank you, grandma. I wasn't really hungry, but I definitely love your food. And so I walked in, gave them a hug, and I said, wow, you know, I saw y'all, you know, I waved at you when I was parking. He said, oh, no, we didn't even see you. We saw a car, but, you know, we didn't recognize the car. I said, oh, yeah. And I said, how long y'all been sitting out here? They said, oh, I don't know, maybe a couple hours. You know, this is what we do. And I was like, wow, it's really special. And I took away from that moment, like, the human connection is so important. It truly is. And so when we talk about this whole, you know, mental health, you know, what are you doing for you? What are you doing to rejuvenate your batteries, right? You know, and I think it's so important because, again, sometimes we're so busy, we're just rolling from this to that and just moving fast. But what are you doing for you? And I want to encourage you to really give yourself a daily treat. Yeah. Every single day I do something kind, uplifting for myself. For me, it can be, you know, where I go for a walk. You know, I go for a walk along the path and the trail and you know, see the trees and there's some water and I just take it in. It's a way for me just to slow things down and just to enjoy and to connect with God, connect with myself, connect with nature. That's one thing I do. Number two, I journal. You know, I'm a big journaler. I love journaling. Because I think what it does is it allows you to just get centered. Up here, I got a lot going on. You know, I'm a single dad, you know, with 2 kids, and I've got a full-time business. I got family, friends. I do community service. There's a lot I got going on. I'm juggling a lot. But when I actually journal, it's like life just slows down. And so when I have a lot going on up here, and when I am able to write it out, the confusion, the different thoughts, the things the anxiety that I'm dealing with, when I write it down, what happens is I get more clarity. I become more just centered. Yeah, that's a great word, centered. And so that's something I do. Something else I do, sometimes I'll just play music, right? Oldies but goodies. I love it. I mean, music, when you play music, especially your favorite songs, it's like, wow. It's like, life just takes on new meaning. And so that's what I'll do. I'll just play some music and have a good time and rock and roll. Or I'll even go to the gym. I love going to the gym. It's one of those things where it releases stress, right? It allows me to, if I'm doing the treadmill, I can sweat. If I'm lifting weights, if I'm doing yoga, right? If I'm stretching, it just allows me to take care of my health. And there's a mind-body connection. And then one other thing I do is I do meditation. Yeah. After I read the Bible, I'll just kind of meditate and reflect on, what I just read. And it makes a difference. It truly does. So again, mental health is so important. And I also want to say this, if you feel like, wow, things are just so stressful and whatnot and confusing, I would encourage you, there's no shame in your game. Go ahead and get the support you need. It may be a therapist, it may be a counselor, but a professional that can help you get through what you're dealing with. A professional, a counselor, a therapist that can help you, really reconnect with yourself, whatever the issue is. And there's nothing wrong with that. And even for your children, I think it's important that we get the support. I'm a firm advocate of getting support because in this life, it can be confusing. Some people go to alcohol or drugs, and alcohol is a drug, as you know. And so one of the things I want to encourage you to do is look at some healthy ways to grow your mental health, right? For you to feel more secure, more safe, more comfortable, more at peace, more joy. And so that's what I wanted to share with you today, right? Mental health is a must. And connecting with our children, and really find out, hey, what are you doing? What are you feeling? I've gone to both of my children at times and I said, listen, I just want to have a talk with you. I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to be mad, but really, what's going on? What are you feeling? Because again, sometimes our kids are holding so much in and we don't want them to explode or to make unwise choices that have some severe consequences. So talking to your child, and just sharing is so important. Something else that I think is really important is for you to really make that connection with your children. As far as we're talking about mental health, what I did one night was I actually got my high school yearbook. That's right. And I also got some of my other booklets, from when I was in school. And we actually went through it together. And what was so great is that they could see that, because sometimes as children, they think, oh, parents are so out of touch. I know I did, thinking about my parents, I was like, man, they are so out of touch. But isn't it true that, when you actually share yourself, as a parent, when you say, hey, this is where I was when I was your age, oh my goodness, it opens them up. My kids were going through my yearbook. They were laughing at my pictures. They were reading all of the, my classmates, what they had written, to me, best wishes. And it was hilarious. And I won some awards when I was in high school. So we talked about that and whatnot. But it was a way that we connected. And I think we connected. I think they found me to be more human, right? Because I think sometimes we think like, oh, my parents don't know anything. They are so lost, so confused. But again, I want to encourage you, make that time for connection. Open up and share who you were when you were their age. Because that is priceless. That's something that they will never forget, and I won't forget. We were right at our kitchen table, and they're going through, laughing, they're reading everything, right? And I shared with them. Oh yeah, this young student, this lady, that was my girlfriend at the time, and so I just opened up. This guy right here, we were best friends, but then, I feel like he stabbed me in my back, And so those are the things that make you more relatable. And especially in today's age with all that's going on and We know that, some young people just feel like, wow, there's no way out, and they commit suicide, or others start drinking and doing other drugs and doing some self-destructive behaviors. And so what I'm here to say is that we want to make sure that we connect with our kids. And again, if you need professional help, go ahead and get that. I'd rather, get the help now rather than it blow up later. So mental health is a must for you and your children. I would love to hear from you. Please go ahead and type in the comment section any feedback that you have. Because again, we're learning, we're growing, and this is something that I think we as a community need to come together. I'm so grateful that many celebrities and professional athletes and entertainers are sharing their own stories with mental health. Because once we remove the stigma, it then says, okay, you know what? Hey, this is cool. I also have some issues I'm dealing with, I'm going through. So again, my name is Marlon Smith, reminding you there's greatness within you. And again, I'm so excited. The feedback has been phenomenal. Continue sharing your feedback. Continuing encourage your family, your friends to check this out, this OverFlow Parenting video series. Because again, it's about us. We can each share, we can learn, we can grow together. Each one teach one, each one reach one. And remember this, what you do today will dictate where you'll be tomorrow. Stay blessed.